The mysterious signal. In the year 2458, humanity had stretched its reach across the stars. Colonies thrived on distant planets, space stations floated in orbit around gas giants, and interstellar trade routes connected systems light years apart. It was an era of peace and progress, with Earth at the center of it all. But peace is a fragile thing. Deep in the heart of Earth's most secure communication center, the Global Space Command in Geneva, technicians monitored signals from across the galaxy. Most were routine: trade reports, colony updates, or navigational data from ships in transit. But one night, a strange signal broke through the noise. It was faint at first, almost like static. Technician Ava Moreno, sipping her late-night coffee, noticed it before anyone else. She frowned, adjusting her headset. The signal wasn't coming from any known frequency. Her fingers danced across the keyboard as she tried to clean up the distortion. Then, the message became clear. A voice, trembling with fear, echoed through the speakers. "They're coming. We can't stop them. Help us." Ava's heart skipped a beat. She ran the signal through the database, trying to identify its source. When the results flashed on her screen, she gasped. The signal was coming from the U.S. Horizon, a human battleship that had vanished 50 years ago during the Andromeda conflict. The ship was declared lost with all hands after a brutal encounter with an alien species. No one had heard from it since. Her fingers trembled as she called for her supervisor. Within minutes, the room was buzzing with activity. Military officials, scientists, and intelligence officers poured in, staring at the screen in disbelief. General Marcus Steele, head of Earth's defense forces, arrived shortly after. A stern man with sharp eyes, he listened to the message in silence. When it ended, he turned to his team. "Verify this signal. Now," he ordered. They tried everything, cross-referencing old codes, analyzing the signal's origin, checking for signs of forgery. But the results were the same. The message was authentic. It came from the horizon. "How is this possible?" Ava whispered, still staring at the screen. "That ship was destroyed." General Steele didn't answer. His mind was already racing ahead. If the horizon was still up there, and if something had terrified its crew enough to send that message, humanity was in danger. A danger big enough to require the one thing Earth had kept hidden for decades: the Iron Armada. The Iron Armada was humanity's most powerful fleet, built during the darkest days of the Andromeda conflict. These ships were monsters of war, equipped with weapons capable of destroying entire planets. But after the war ended, the fleet was hidden away in deep space, placed in cryo-sleep. Humanity hoped they would never need to awaken it. But now, the signal had changed everything. General Steele wasted no time. He sent a secure transmission to the hidden fleet's location, far beyond Pluto's orbit. The message was simple: activate the Armada. Prepare for deployment. On board the flagship U.S. Titan, deep in its cryopod, Captain Elias Kane stirred. His body, frozen for over 40 years, began to thaw as the ship's AI brought him back to life. The moment his eyes opened, he knew something was wrong. The cryo-sleep was only to be interrupted in the gravest emergencies. The AI's calm voice echoed in his ears. "Good morning, Captain Kane. You have been activated due to a Class 1 threat." Kane sat up slowly, his mind adjusting to consciousness. His last memory was the day the fleet was put to rest. The war was over. Peace had come at last. But now something had gone terribly wrong. "Report," he croaked, his voice rough from disuse. "A distress signal has been received from the U.S. Horizon. You are to investigate and neutralize any threats." Kane's eyes narrowed. The Horizon? That ship was supposed to be lost. If it was sending a distress signal now, after all these years, it could only mean one thing: an enemy more dangerous than anything they'd faced before. Across the fleet, other captains and crew members awoke from their long sleep. The ships powered up, engines humming, weapons systems coming online. The Iron Armada was no longer a sleeping giant. It was awake, and it was ready for war. Back on Earth, General Steele watched as the fleet's status reports came in. One by one, the ships signaled their readiness. He felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. Mobilizing the Armada was not a decision made lightly. It meant that whatever was out there, it posed a threat to all of humanity. He turned to his officers. "We're not just sending our fleet," he said quietly. "We're sending a message. If anyone or anything threatens humanity, we will answer." As the Iron Armada prepared to launch, a sense of unease spread through Earth's leadership. The signal had brought more questions than answers. What had happened to the horizon? Who were they? And why had they waited 50 years to make their move? But one thing was certain: humanity was no longer waiting. The most powerful fleet ever built was heading into the unknown, and the fate of the galaxy might depend on what they found. The fleet awakens. The cold silence of deep space was broken as the Iron Armada roared to life. Far beyond Pluto's orbit, hidden in the shadows of a dead moon, the fleet's massive ships began to awaken from their long slumber. Engines hummed, lights flickered on, and powerful weapons systems powered up, casting eerie glows across the hulls of the war machines. On board the flagship U.S. Titan, Captain Elias Kane stood on the bridge, staring out at the fleet assembling around him. Even after 40 years in cryo-sleep, the sight of these colossal ships took his breath away. Each vessel was a masterpiece of destruction, designed to be faster, stronger, and deadlier than anything humanity had ever built. But as awe-inspiring as the fleet was, there was a heavy weight in Kane's chest. They weren't waking up for a celebration. They were being sent into the unknown, chasing a ghost signal from a ship long thought lost. Something felt off, and Kane's instincts told him this mission was more dangerous than anyone realized. "Status report," Kane commanded, his voice echoing across the bridge. His first officer, Lieutenant Maravos, responded quickly. "All systems are operational, Captain. The fleet is at 95% readiness. We're waiting on your orders." Kane nodded, but before he could speak, the ship's AI, Athena, interrupted. "Captain, there are anomalies in the fleet's communication systems," Athena said. Her voice was calm, but Kane could hear a hint of something unusual, something almost like hesitation. "We're receiving fragmented transmissions, but they're not from Earth or the horizon." Kane frowned. "Show me." The main screen flickered, and strange symbols appeared. The characters were unlike any language Kane had seen before. They pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, almost as if they were alive. Then a sound accompanied the symbols, a low, guttural whisper that sent chills down the spines of everyone on the bridge. "Is this interference?" Voss asked, her voice uneasy. Athena responded, "Unknown. The source is undetectable." Kane stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. "Keep monitoring it. Prepare the fleet for immediate departure." As the Iron Armada began its journey toward the source of the distress signal, the strange transmissions continued. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, though no one could understand them. Some crew members reported hearing voices in their sleep, voices that weren't human. Others claimed to see shadows moving in the corners of their eyes, even in the brightly lit corridors. Captain Kane tried to keep the crew focused, but unease spread like a virus. The fleet wasn't just heading toward danger. It felt like the danger was already with them. Hours into their journey, the fleet passed through an uncharted region of space known as the Veil. This area was a dead zone. No stars, no planets, just endless blackness. It was a place where even the bravest explorers avoided, claiming it felt wrong. As the ships entered the Veil, the strange transmissions intensified. The whispers now sounded like they were coming from inside the ships. Crew members began experiencing vivid nightmares of alien landscapes and twisted, monstrous beings. Some awoke screaming, unable to remember what they had seen but knowing it was something terrible. Then, without warning, the fleet's sensors picked up a massive object ahead. An alien ship, floating silently in the void. It was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The ship's surface was covered in dark, organic material that pulsed as if it were breathing. Strange symbols, similar to those in the transmissions, were etched into its hull. Kane ordered the fleet to halt. "Prepare a boarding team," he said, his voice steady but tense. "We need to know what's on that ship." Lieutenant Voss hesitated. "Captain, we don't know what we're dealing with. This could be a trap." Kane met her gaze. "I know. But we need answers, and we're not going to get them by sitting here." The boarding team suited up and approached the alien vessel. As they entered through a jagged breach in the hull, their lights revealed a nightmare. The interior was covered in the same organic material, and the walls seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. There were no signs of life, or so they thought. Suddenly, one of the team's communication lines went dead. The rest of the fleet listened in horror as the remaining team members described seeing shadowy figures moving in the darkness. Then, one by one, their signals were cut off. The last thing they heard was a single, terrified scream. Back on the Titan, Kane clenched his fists. Whatever had taken the boarding team wasn't human, and it wasn't friendly. "Get us out of here," Kane barked. "Full speed to the horizon's last known coordinates." As the fleet pulled away from the alien ship, the strange symbols on its hull began to glow brighter, and the whispers turned into a deafening roar. The Iron Armada was now in the heart of something far bigger and far deadlier than they had ever imagined. And the real horror was only just beginning. The journey into darkness. The Iron Armada surged forward, leaving the haunted alien vessel behind, but the fear it planted lingered. The deeper they moved into uncharted space, the more the darkness seemed to press against their ships, as if the void itself was watching. Captain Elias Kane sat rigid in his command chair aboard the U.S. Titan, his eyes fixed on the swirling blackness ahead. The fleet was heading toward the last known coordinates of the U.S. horizon, but Kane felt in his bones that they weren't prepared for what lay ahead. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates," reported Lieutenant Voss, her voice tense. No sign of the horizon yet, but she hesitated, glancing at her screen. "There's something else out there." Kane frowned. "Define something." "Multiple unidentified objects," Voss replied. "Stationary. No energy signatures. They're just floating." "Put it on screen," Kane ordered. The main display flickered, and the crew gasped. Before them drifted a graveyard of ships, not just human vessels, but alien crafts of all shapes and sizes. Some were ancient, their hulls corroded and broken, while others looked freshly destroyed. The wreckage floated aimlessly, caught in an invisible web of death. "What the hell happened here?" Kane muttered. Athena, the ship's AI, responded with unsettling calm. "The wreckage spans over 3 centuries. Multiple species, no survivors detected." As the fleet navigated through the debris field, the crew grew silent, their eyes wide with horror. It was clear this wasn't a battlefield. This was a trap that had claimed countless victims over the centuries. Suddenly, the Titan's sensors flared to life. "Captain," Voss shouted. "I've got something. A signal." Kane's heart skipped a beat. "From the horizon?" Voss shook her head. "No, it's different." The message played over the bridge speakers, a garbled mix of human and alien languages, layered over with static. But one word cut through the noise, repeated over and over in a voice that didn't sound quite human. "Run." Kane shot out of his chair. "Shields up. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." But it was too late. Without warning, the debris field shifted. Wrecked ships began to move, as if pulled by invisible strings. The crew watched in horror as the twisted remains of once mighty vessels fused together, forming monstrous, biomechanical creatures. They glowed with an eerie light, their jagged forms pulsating with unnatural energy. What are those?" Voss whispered. "I don't know," Kane replied, his voice grim, "but they're not friendly." The creatures lunged at the fleet, moving with terrifying speed. The Titan shuddered as one of the abominations slammed into its shields, sending ripples of energy across the hull. "Return fire," Kane barked. The Iron Armada unleashed a barrage of weapons, but the creatures adapted quickly. What should have been devastating blasts only seemed to anger them. The fleet's most powerful weapons were barely making a dent. "Captain, we can't hold them off," Voss shouted. "They're everywhere." Kane clenched his jaw. They couldn't retreat. Not yet. They needed answers, and he knew the only place they might find them was aboard the Horizon. "Plot a course to the Horizon's last known location," he ordered. "All ships, cover our approach." The fleet pushed forward, weaving through the wreckage as the monstrous entities pursued them. The Titan's hull groaned under the strain, but Kane refused to stop. He could see the faint outline of the horizon ahead, its dark silhouette barely visible against the endless black. But as they drew closer, the truth became horrifyingly clear. The U.S. horizon was intact, but it wasn't empty. The ship's surface was covered in the same pulsating, organic material they had seen on the alien vessel. Strange symbols glowed faintly along its hull, and its lights flickered like the last gasps of a dying star. They took the Horizon," Voss whispered in shock. Kane's stomach turned. Whatever had consumed the alien ship had claimed the Horizon as well. But there was no time to dwell on the horror. They needed to board the ship and uncover the truth before the monstrous fleet tore them apart. "Prepare a boarding team," Kane commanded, his voice steel. "We're going in." As the boarding pods launched toward the corrupted Horizon, Kane couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the heart of something ancient and malevolent, something that had been waiting in the dark for centuries, and it had finally found them. The enemy revealed. The boarding pods from the U.S. Titan drifted silently toward the corrupted husk of the U.S. Horizon. Inside, Captain Elias Kane and his team prepared themselves for what they might find. The eerie glow from the Horizon's twisted hull reflected off their visors, making it feel like they were diving into the mouth of a living creature. "We're docking now," Lieutenant Mara Voss whispered through the comms. Her voice, usually steady, betrayed a hint of fear. The magnetic clamps of the pod latched onto the Horizon's airlock with a dull thud. Kane took a deep breath and gave the order. "Breaching. Stay sharp." With a hiss, the pod's door slid open, revealing a corridor bathed in dim, flickering light. The walls were covered in the same organic, pulsating material they'd seen on the alien ship. It writhed subtly, as if the ship itself were breathing. The team moved cautiously, their weapons raised. The air was thick with a metallic, almost sweet smell, the scent of decay and something far older. "HFY, can you access the Horizon systems?" Kane asked. The AI's voice crackled through their earpieces. "Negative, Captain. The ship's systems are corrupted. The foreign material is interfering with all electronic signals." Kane's jaw tightened. They were flying blind. As they advanced deeper into the ship, strange symbols glowed faintly on the walls, pulsing in rhythm with the crew's own heartbeats. It was as if the ship was alive, or being controlled by something that was. They reached the bridge, and that's when they saw it. The crew of the Horizon was still there, or what was left of them. Bodies were fused to the walls and floors, their faces frozen in expressions of pure terror. Their eyes glowed with the same eerie light as the alien material, and some of them moved, not alive, but not entirely dead either. Their mouths opened and closed in silent screams, as if trapped between worlds. What did this?" Voss whispered, her voice barely audible. Before Kane could answer, a voice echoed through the ship, a voice that didn't belong to any of them. "We are the Harbingers." The words reverberated through the walls, as if the ship itself was speaking. The temperature dropped suddenly, their breath visible in the freezing air. "Your kind has been judged. Your time is over." Kane spun around, trying to locate the source, but it was everywhere and nowhere at once. Then, from the shadows, they emerged. the harvesters. They were tall, skeletal beings, their bodies a grotesque fusion of metal and flesh. Their eyes burned with a cold blue fire, and their movements were unnaturally smooth, as if they glided rather than walked. Their hands ended in long, blade-like fingers, and strange symbols etched into their skin glowed with a sickly light. The team opened fire instinctively, but the bullets and energy blasts seemed to slow in the air, dissipating before they could reach their targets. The harvesters moved with terrifying speed, closing the distance in seconds. Kane barely dodged a swipe from one of the creatures, its blade-like fingers slicing through the air where his head had been. "Fall back," he shouted. "Get to the pods." But the harvesters weren't just attacking, they were absorbing. One of Kane's soldiers, Sergeant Holloway, was caught mid-sprint. The harvester's hand shot out, piercing his chest. But instead of simply killing him, the creature pulled Holloway into itself, merging his body into its own twisted form. His scream echoed down the corridor before being silenced forever. Kane's heart pounded as he and the remaining crew fought their way back to the pods. But the harvesters were relentless, their numbers growing as more of the Horizon's corrupted crew rose to join them. Just as they reached the airlock, a sudden, blinding pulse of energy surged through the ship, knocking everyone off their feet. Kane scrambled to his knees, blinking away the afterimage. Standing at the end of the corridor was a massive harvester, larger than the rest. Its body was a grotesque amalgamation of countless victims, their faces and limbs still visible within its twisted form. But what caught Kane's attention was the thing's face. It was human. Captain Kane. It spoke, its voice a horrifying blend of metallic resonance and human familiarity. Kane's blood ran cold. He recognized that voice. It was Admiral Rourke, the Horizon's commander. "We've transcended," the creature said. "Join us. Become more than flesh." Kane fired his weapon, but the blast was absorbed harmlessly into the creature's chest. The thing didn't even flinch. "We need to go, now," Voss screamed, pulling Kane toward the pod. They slammed the airlock shut behind them and launched the pod back to the Titan. As they sped away, Kane looked back at the horizon, now fully engulfed in the harvester's living metal. The enemy wasn't just an alien species, it was humanity's own future, twisted and corrupted into something unrecognizable. And they had only just begun their invasion. The battle begins. The boarding pod slammed into the docking bay of the U.S. Titan with a screech of metal against metal. The moment the hatch hissed open, Captain Elias Kane and his battered team stumbled out, gasping for breath, their minds haunted by what they had seen aboard the Horizon. "Seal the bay. Full lockdown," Kane barked, his voice hoarse but commanding. As the blast doors groaned shut, Kane turned to Lieutenant Mara Voss, her face pale beneath the grime and sweat. "They're coming," he whispered, more to himself than to her. No sooner had the words left his lips than the alarms began to blare. The fleet's sensors picked up movement, lots of it. The harvesters weren't content with the Horizon. They were coming for the Iron Armada. "All hands to battle stations," Voss shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Shields up, weapons hot." The Titan shuddered as the first wave of the harvesters descended. The creatures didn't need ships. They moved through space as if it were water, their twisted forms undulating and shifting, fusing with the wreckage from the debris field to create monstrous biomechanical war machines. "Fire at will," Kane ordered. The Iron Armada roared to life. Beams of searing energy and missile salvos tore into the approaching horde. Explosions blossomed in the void, illuminating the battlefield in flashes of white-hot light. For a moment, it seemed like the fleet's superior firepower was enough. The first wave of harvesters disintegrated under the assault. But then the second wave came, and this one was different. The new creatures had adapted. They twisted and reformed in mid-flight, morphing to deflect and absorb the Armada's weapons. Blasts that had vaporized the first wave barely slowed them down. The fleet's most powerful cannons suddenly felt like pea shooters against an unstoppable tide. On the bridge of the Titan, Kane gritted his teeth as he watched the battle unfold on the main screen. The Armada was giving everything they had, but it wasn't enough. "Captain, we're losing ships," Voss cried out. "The U.S. Valor and U.S. Perseus are gone." Kane slammed his fist against the console. He couldn't let this happen. They needed a new strategy, and fast. Athena. Kane barked at the ship's eye. "Scan for any weaknesses, anything we can exploit." The AI's voice came back, cool and detached. "Analysis complete. The Harvester's energy signatures indicate a centralized power source within their hive structure. Destroying this source may destabilize their forms." Kane's eyes narrowed. "Where is it?" Athena highlighted a massive, pulsating object at the center of the swarm, a grotesque fusion of metal, flesh, and energy. It looked like a living heart, pumping corrupted life into the Harvester horde. "That's our target," Kane growled. "All ships, concentrate fire on that central core." The fleet shifted formation, focusing their weapons on the monstrous heart. Beams of energy and missile volleys rained down on it, but the Harvesters reacted instantly. They formed a protective barrier around the core, sacrificing themselves to absorb the attacks. "We'll never break through at this rate," Voss muttered. Kane's mind raced. They needed to hit the core from inside. "Prepare a strike team," he ordered. "We're taking the fight to them." Voss stared at him. "You're not serious." "Dead serious," Kane replied. "We can't win this from a distance. We need to get in there and blow that thing apart from the inside." Within minutes, Kane and his elite team were suited up and launched in a small, heavily armored assault craft. As they weaved through the battlefield, dodging Harvester attacks, the Titan and the rest of the fleet provided covering fire, keeping the swarm's attention divided. The assault craft punched through the protective barrier and slammed into the grotesque core. The team disembarked into a nightmarish landscape, a cavernous interior filled with pulsating veins of energy and the remains of countless victims fused into the walls. "Plant the charges," Kane ordered, his voice echoing in the grotesque chamber. As the team worked quickly, the core's walls began to shift. The Harvesters knew they were there. From the shadows, twisted forms emerged, familiar forms, faces from the past. Fallen comrades. The Harvesters weren't just absorbing the dead, they were using their memories, their voices. "Join us, Elias," one of them whispered, a grotesque mockery of Admiral Rourke. "There's no escape, no victory, only evolution." Kane gritted his teeth, refusing to be swayed. "I'll take death over whatever you've become." The final charge was set. Kane hit the detonator, but nothing happened. The core pulsed, absorbing the energy of the explosives. "It's not working," Voss shouted. Kane realized what they had to do. The core wasn't just energy, it needed life to sustain itself. To destroy it, they needed to overload it from within. "I'm staying," Kane said, pulling Voss toward the exit. "No, we'll find another way," she protested. "There is no other way," Kane replied firmly. "Get the team out of here." "That's an order." Before Voss could argue, Kane shoved her through the exit and sealed it behind her. Alone in the pulsing heart of the enemy, Kane activated his suit's power core, overloading it with maximum energy. As the Harvesters closed in, Kane's last thoughts were of Earth, of the people he had sworn to protect. "For humanity," he whispered, and then everything went white. From the Titan, Voss watched as the central core exploded in a brilliant flash, the shockwave rippling through the swarm. The Harvesters shrieked in unison, their forms collapsing as the core's destruction unraveled their existence. The battlefield fell silent. The Iron Armada had survived, but at a terrible cost. And as the fleet began its journey back to Earth, Voss couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Harvesters had been defeated, but their message remained clear. Humanity had been noticed, and more was coming. Sacrifice and survival. The blinding explosion from the core's destruction echoed through the emptiness of space, a brilliant, silent testament to Captain Elias Kane's final sacrifice. On board the U.S. Titan, Lieutenant Mara Voss stood frozen, her eyes locked on the view screen where the monstrous heart of the Harvester hive had once pulsed. Now, it was nothing more than drifting debris, dissipating like ash in the vacuum. The bridge was eerily silent, the crew struggling to process what had just happened. They had won, but the cost was staggering. "Status report," Voss finally whispered, her voice raw. "The Harvesters are gone. Athena, the ship's AI, confirmed. Their forms have collapsed. No remaining threats detected." A wave of relief washed over the crew, but it was tinged with grief. Kane's sacrifice had saved them, but the loss felt like a gaping wound in their hearts. Voss clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay composed. "Begin recovery operations," she ordered. "Search for any survivors. We need to account for every ship." The Iron Armada was battered, its once mighty fleet reduced to a fraction of its original strength. Fires burned in the distance, and debris fields drifted like silent tombstones. Still, they were alive, and that was something. Hours turned into days as the fleet repaired what it could. Survivors were pulled from damaged ships, their stories of narrow escapes and miraculous survivals adding to the growing legend of the battle. But amidst the recovery, a new unsettling realization began to take hold. Kane's sacrifice had destroyed the central core, but as the fleet's scientists analyzed the wreckage, they uncovered a terrifying truth. The core wasn't the source of the Harvesters. It had been a relay. A horrifying message had been sent out in the final moments of the battle, a pulse of energy far more powerful than anything the fleet had ever seen. It wasn't just a distress call, it was a beacon. "Captain Voss," Athena's voice echoed across the bridge. "I have detected an incoming signal. It's originating from deep space, far beyond the Andromeda frontier." Voss's heart sank. "Put it on screen." The display flickered, revealing a vast, swirling void, a dark rift in space that seemed to swallow light itself. But within that darkness, something moved. Something massive. A voice, deeper and more ancient than anything they had heard, rumbled through the ship's speakers. "We have heard your defiance. We are coming." The bridge fell silent, the weight of the message settling over them like a shroud. "How long do we have?" Voss asked quietly. ATG&A processed the data for a moment before responding. "Unknown. The entity's speed exceeds anything in our database. Estimates suggest it could arrive within months or weeks." Voss felt the weight of the galaxy pressing down on her. Kane's sacrifice had bought them time, but not much. They weren't just facing a new threat. They were facing an invasion. "Plot a course for Earth," she ordered, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "We need to warn them. We need to prepare." The fleet began its slow journey home, carrying with it the scars of battle and the burden of knowledge. The story of their victory would spread across human space, but so would the truth. Humanity was no longer alone, and the true war had only just begun. As the Titan drifted through the silent void, Voss found herself in the captain's quarters, Kane's quarters now. She sat at his desk, staring at the small personal items he'd left behind. A photo of the original crew, a medal from the Andromeda conflict, and a simple worn journal. Opening it, she found Kane's final entry, written the day the fleet had been put into cryosleep. "If you're reading this, it means the Armada has awakened. Whatever's out there, remember this. Humanity doesn't back down. We fight. We survive. And we endure, no matter what." Voss closed the journal, her resolve hardening. Kane was gone, but his spirit lived on in every member of the fleet, in every person they had saved, and in the fight they would soon face. As the stars stretched out before them, the message was clear. The battle was over, but the war for humanity's survival had only just begun. The aftermath and new threat. The U.S. Titan, and the remnants of the Iron Armada cut through the darkness of space, limping their way back to Earth. The fleet was battered, scared from a battle that was supposed to be the final stand. But in reality, it was only the beginning. On the bridge, Lieutenant Voss stood in the captain's chair, staring at the swirling blue orb of Earth slowly coming into view. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, untouched and unaware of the cosmic horrors looming just beyond the stars. But Voss knew better. The crew worked in silence, each person haunted by the memories of the harvesters and the ultimate sacrifice of Captain Elias Kane. His absence was felt in every corner of the ship, but his words echoed in Voss's mind, fortifying her resolve. Humanity doesn't back down. We fight, we survive, and we endure, no matter what. As the Titan entered Earth's orbit, Global Command scrambled to establish a secure connection. Within moments, General Marcus Steele's face appeared on the main screen, his stern expression betraying a hint of relief at seeing Voss and the remaining fleet. "Lieutenant Voss," Steele greeted, his voice steady but curious. "We received fragments of your report. What happened out there?" Voss took a deep breath. "The harvester threat has been neutralized, but we uncovered something far worse." She briefed him on the destruction of the horizon, Kane's sacrifice, and the final message from the void. Steele's expression darkened with each detail. "A beacon," he muttered, leaning forward. "You're telling me we didn't defeat the enemy. We just called more of them." "Yes, sir," Voss confirmed. "And they're coming." Steele was silent for a moment before nodding. "Understood. Prepare for debriefing. We'll mobilize Earth's defenses immediately." But even as he spoke, Voss could see the doubt in his eyes. They both knew Earth's defenses were nowhere near ready for what was coming. Weeks passed. The story of the Iron Armada's battle spread across human space, inspiring awe and fear in equal measure. Memorials were held for the fallen, with Captain Kane becoming a symbol of human resilience and sacrifice. But beneath the surface of this fragile hope, a shadow loomed. Humanity began to prepare. Shipyards worked around the clock, constructing new warships using the data gathered from the harvester remains. Scientists scrambled to develop new technologies, while military forces across the colonies trained for an enemy they barely understood. But nothing could have prepared them for what came next. 1 month after the Titan's return, deep space sensors picked up an anomaly. A massive rift had opened far beyond the Andromeda frontier, a swirling black maw that seemed to devour light itself. From within, something emerged. Not a fleet, not an army, but a single ship. It was colossal, dwarfing even the largest vessels of the Iron Armada. Its surface was a twisted blend of alien metal and organic tissue, pulsating with an eerie dark light. Symbols, similar to those found on the horizon, glowed faintly along its hull, but these were different. They weren't just symbols. They were names. Names of human worlds. The ship moved slowly, deliberately, as if it had all the time in the universe. Earth's fleets scrambled to intercept it. But their weapons were useless. Missiles disintegrated before reaching it. Energy blasts were absorbed like drops of water into an ocean. From the ship, a message broadcasted across every human frequency. "We are the architects. You have been judged. Your resistance has been noted. Now, you will witness our final design." The architects were not just another alien species. They were the creators of the harvesters, and they had come not to conquer, but to remake. On board the Titan, Voss watched the ship's approach with a sinking feeling. She had faced death, seen the horrors of the harvesters, but this was something else entirely. "Athene," she whispered. "What are we looking at?" The AI's response was colder than usual. "Unknown. This entity exceeds all known classifications. Estimated power output is beyond our current understanding." Voss clenched her fists. Captain Kane's sacrifice had bought them time, but not enough. Humanity was staring into the abyss, and the abyss was staring back, ready to consume everything. "Prepare the fleet," she ordered. We fight until the last breath. But even as she spoke, a part of her knew the truth. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for the soul of humanity. The architects had arrived, and the true war was about to begin.